Hey, everybody, what is going on? Serial Overdrive here. It's a Saturday. I've got a coffee, so it is time to talk some shit. That's right, it's Shit Talk Saturday, episode 2. And we might change the name of that because it turns out that saying shit in the title and right off the bat in a video isn't the best for the algorithm. Not only do those videos get demonetized, they also don't really do that good and they hurt other videos on your channel. So I might be changing the name. And that's actually what I wanted to talk about today. Not the name change, but the fact that YouTube and all these social media companies have such an effect on what we say, what we listen to, and what we hear online. There's been a few things recently that have caused me to think that this would be an interesting topic to discuss this Saturday. So first off, and the thing that really sort of energized me to have this conversation was I was watching a video by Lost LeBlanc, travel YouTuber, really good, and he made a video on the Canadian trucker protest. I really don't know that much about the Canadian trucker protest or Canada in general. I've been to Canada a few times. I know that they use monopoly money instead of real currency, but that's about as far as my knowledge goes. Also, they like maple syrup. But that's about as far as my knowledge goes. It was an interesting video. He brought up some good points that I don't necessarily agree with. I don't necessarily agree with the truckers that decided not to get vaccinated. I think most people probably should get vaccinated. But anyways, he brought up some really good points. And one of the things I noticed in his video that it wasn't a point, but it was something I noticed. He didn't even talk about it. He wouldn't say COVID. Instead of COVID, he called it the boink. He didn't even, when he said the boink, he didn't even say COVID. That's what it means. It wasn't like one of those things where in these TV shows, because they can only say fuck once, they say, instead of fuck, I've been telling everybody to frack. And that's what they use then instead of fuck. They just basically replace the word and sort of cement in your brain that this is what means this. And now we don't get rated R or PG-13 or whatever. Anyways, he didn't even do that, right? He just said there's a virus going around, and instead of calling it what it actually is, we're going to call it the boink. So then anytime someone said COVID, it was censored out. He called it the boink, and it didn't affect the video that much, but I thought it was interesting that social media has such an effect, and demonetization has such an effect, and sort of censorship is running so rampant right now that you can't even say COVID in a video without fearing for your channel. And I'm not talking about anti-vax, right? That's a whole different topic. You want to spend COVID information, all of that. I can understand that is detrimental to society. I think that we shouldn't necessarily censor people for everything that they say, and there should be limits, but it's an interesting question, I thought. And it's interesting to actually note the fact that people are being forced to censor these words out of their conversations. And I think this is happening all over the place. If you watch any TV show that was made in the last 2 years, they tend to avoid the fact that this whole COVID thing happened. You don't see characters watch. All right, in Shameless they didn't, but in most TV shows, you don't see characters wearing masks. You don't see them watching the news to listen about COVID. No one goes into lockdown. It's just not a thing that happens. Everybody carries on as if 2020 was a great year and 2021 happened, and then 2022, yay! They don't talk about any sort of very depressing event that happened over those last 2 years that caused us all a lockdown, caused a bunch of mental health issues, caused people to die, and is seriously detrimental to society. No, they don't talk about that because advertisers don't want it. YouTube knows the same thing, so this video, because I said COVID a few times, is probably going to get demonetized. But I think that's a ridiculous way to control society, and I don't think that's actually good for us. This is a huge thing that's affected the zeitgeist of just everybody around the world. In every country you go to, they've had some sort of effect from COVID, and most of those effects are negative. And yet we're not talking about it. And I think one of the things that you've noticed, and one of the things that I've always heard, is that when you've got these transitions and there's no time to talk about it, there's no time to digest what's going on, there's no conversation around it, it actually leads to worse mental health. And that's something that I think a lot of people now care about, right? Everybody's talking about mental health, but nobody's talking about the fact that we're not talking about the issues that are pressing society, because then there's all these things that come up. You're just supposed to be positive all the time. For instance, Destiny. He's a YouTuber, Twitch guy, not Twitch guy anymore, but he's a gaming YouTuber. He used to be, now he's more political. He was recently on Twitch. He's already been demonetized off Twitch, and I sort of think that was, I get why he got demonetized, okay? But he was on Twitch, and he basically had this viewpoint that transsexual women should not be able to compete as women in sporting events. There are some reasons behind this, and there's also reasons why they should be allowed to compete. And I think it's a sport by sport basis sort of thing. And I think, there's weight classes and things like that, and all sorts of things in boxing and all these different sports. And there's a whole discussion behind that. I'm not a doctor. I have no idea what I'm saying when it comes to any of this stuff. So I'm not even going to get into that, right? But his opinion was basically transsexual women shouldn't be allowed to compete as women in sporting events. And that got him permanently banned off Twitch. Now, even if you disagree with someone, I don't think that should lead to an instant ban. He wasn't saying anything from what I saw. I didn't really watch that much of it, but from what I could tell, there was nothing inflammatory said. He wasn't pointing out anyone specifically and insulting them. He wasn't doing anything that was like hyper aggressive, hyper negative, hyper anything, right? He was just having a debate with someone. And I think there should be that room for debate, right? And I understand there are problems around having debates, right? Like, you can't debate something with a Nazi for the millionth time because it's like, look, I get it. You think Hitler's sexy and you want to give him a blowjob, but like, dude, we've had this conversation a million times. You're a neo-Nazi. Like, there's nothing there to discuss. It's a discussion that's run its course. But I think with a lot of transsexual rights in general and even homosexuality, that's still a relatively new topic. And when I say relatively new, I mean it's something that's really been broached in the last 10, 20 years. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that people have these discussions, just like I think it's good that people have discussions with COVID. It allows these things, these ideas to work their way into the zeitgeist and sort of naturally occur within people. You're going to find that each generation is more and more progressive. My generation, like I'm a millennial, even if you go to the far, far right, a lot of those kids, or not kids anymore, a lot of those adults are still fairly progressive if you compare them to the far, far right of 50 or 60 years ago. I mean, once upon a time, it was actually fairly normal to think that certain portions of society should just be segregated out of society. And I'm not even talking about people who are black or people who are a different race. I'm talking about people who are people of mental illness or anything like that, right? One of the classic things that people do is they like experiment on them, they euthanize them, and it was all like barely okay. Like society just looked at it and they said, well, that's what you do with people who are mentally deficient. That's what you do with people who have mental illness. You just go ahead and euthanize them. No, it's not euthanize. That's a little different. No, sterilize them. And that was something that people were doing regularly, I think in the 1920s, 1930s. Then this whole thing called the Holocaust happened. People realized, hey, maybe we shouldn't take this to its extremes and maybe this whole idea is bad. And society sort of worked its way out of that, right? And part of the reason these things happen is because either someone takes it to the extreme or there's just natural discourse and people realize the way that they want to go. I think the same thing happened with sort of homosexuality and transsexuality and everything like that. If you look at the music that was going around back in the early 2010s, a lot of that was more about acceptance. A lot of that was just about the words that we as a society used and why we shouldn't use them. And that was a discussion that hadn't happened before in the 2000s. Words that I don't even think I'd say on here because I do know that they're very inflammatory, and I realize that a lot of people don't use those words anymore because of the negative, not the negative connotations around those words, but because using them in a negative way displays a negative connotation towards people who have been greatly stigmatized for a reason that they shouldn't be. You know, I think I should just use it to give. I'm talking about like the F word, not the FU word. And I think anyone can say fuck now, but there's another word, the new F word, and saying gay or something like that in a negative way. Stuff like that. A lot of people. It used to be fairly common in the 2000s. Like those were just words that people throw around. It wasn't even considered a swear word, basically. And now they are because people realize that using those words in a negative way, even if you don't have any sort of discriminatory preferences towards those people, is discriminatory because now you're speaking down to them and you're enabling people to be negative towards them that actually do want to be that way. Like you're enabling sort of that racist, that homophobia, that just negative thing in society that really we should be pushing against. But there was a natural discourse there. That wasn't something that happened through social media. There was never this moment in time where it was like, hey, if you say the F word on social media, you're just banned. There was never this moment where it's like, hey, if you call someone gay on social media and you're not calling them a homosexual in a nice sort of way, you're going to be banned. There was never that conversation. It was just society sort of naturally evolved. And through listening to other people, we realized that we shouldn't be doing that. And some people still are. I know there's probably some of you listening to this video that still use those words in that way. And one of the reasons you shouldn't is because even same thing with the N-word. When you use these words if you use these words in a non-defamatory way towards that group of people, you're still defaming them because you're enabling people to use those words in a negative way towards that group of people, right? Like, if your name, let's take my name, because I hope to God no one's named their baby Serial Overdrive. If your name's Serial Overdrive, right? And every time something negative happens, you go, that fucking Serial Overdrive happened. Eventually, that's just going to lead towards negativity around that name. And then anytime I'm around, or anytime like something that's associated with me is around, it gets that negative vibe because Serial Overdrive is just a negative word. This is a negative word that's attached to this specific look or this specific thing. And you see what I'm saying, okay? So I get it. There's certain things that do have to be worked out of our society, but I don't know if the way to work those out of our society is just by banning any discussion of it whatsoever, because I think you need to have a little bit of back and forth so that you can actually see which side is winning and which side's losing. If you completely silence both sides, it does feel better for everybody, right? Like, not talking about anti-vax, I get it. It's good because it's such a stupid idea. But by silencing it and not having this discussion, you're actually not allowing a lot of these anti-vax people to be converted over. And there is something to be said, like, if you keep discussing it, if you keep going over the same points again and again, one of the problems here is that eventually the stupidest ideas can win out just because they're being debated. For instance, if we want to have a debate about why you shouldn't jack off in front of preschools, I don't think we should have that debate, right? Like, that's obvious. There should be no debates about that. That shouldn't be something that makes it into the like normal conversation. That's just something that should be frowned upon. You should be arrested for that, right? Like, that's a sick fucking thing to do. But if you keep talking about it, eventually there are going to be those sick fucks out there who decide, well, this is somewhat normal, and they go ahead and do something like that, right? So you shouldn't. There's certain things that like debaters shouldn't just go in and debate these people all the time. But if you just silence these people, then there's no way for any sort of like conversation to happen. There's no way for someone to be like, what do you think of this guy? And then someone watches the video and they're like, fucking idiot. You know, like, that's how things work in society. That's how some of these groups, there are groups that are ostracized like that, right? But that's how it works. You can't silence these groups because when you silence them, you just push them into more and more sort of fringe communities. And as you do that, those viewpoints just get amplified more and more. It's the same thing you just see in social media in general, right? Like, nobody talks about COVID, so nobody talks about COVID. Everybody posts their best moments, so that's what everybody thinks life's like, right? Everybody wants to be on vacation in Cabo, driving a Ferrari and, you know, banging a supermodel or something like that. It's not that these influencers or these people are actually living that every day of their life. It's just that that's what they push. And because that's what they push, that's what everybody thinks is normal. And because that's what everybody thinks is normal, and that's what they're seeing all the time, because social media is just so fucking pervasive in society right now. So back in the day, like, I was around like MySpace days. Like, I'm old. But back in the day, right? MySpace, Facebook, all that was just a way to connect with your friends. You go on there for a little bit, you'd see what everybody's up to. And like, most of the time it was just like normal stuff. Like, people were going out to parties, you know, maybe someone was like, hey, got a new car. It's a used 1990 Ford Focus or some shit like that, right? Like, I don't think Ford Focus was made in 1990, but you get what I'm saying. Like, you'd be like, oh, cool, that's cool. Like, Dave got a new car. That's awesome, you know? And you're like, Eric, what the fuck are you doing over there, dude? Why'd you decide to go to a small town? Like, you know, or, you know, you see people that were just messing up their lives and people would be having conversations. It was just like a barely normal place. It was like a high school cafeteria. And no one in your high school cafeteria probably drove Lamborghinis and was going to Cabo every day. And that's just not what people do anyways. But nobody was making it look that way. So it was all pretty normal. You go on there and then slowly you got influencers. And the thing with influencers, and like, I'm part of that, I guess, unfortunately, but I don't think I'm not talking about my car, I'm not talking about my house, or I'm not talking about living this crazy life. And I do some things that are cool, and I do talk about those every now and then, but I try not to make that the main point of living, because I don't think it is. You know, you live your best life, but you shouldn't be pushing an unreasonable image on people. When things are bad, I sometimes talk about it, and when things are good, I sometimes talk about it. But here's what's going on, right? Like, everybody's only talking about the positive or the extremely negative stuff, because that's what really draws people in. It's the same with these Rust videos, right? Like, I've got to like actively work not to go too negative and not to go too positive. If I'm too positive, then maybe like too positive isn't that bad, but too positive all the time is just like, come on, like, there's some things that are negative about a game. And too negative all the time, again, there's some things that are positive. You've got to run that middle line. And a lot of people, what these algorithms do is it just puts you in one slot. It's like, hey, this is the negative blank person, and we're going to show it to anyone who wants to see this negativity. And like, oh, this is the positive person. We show this to anybody who wants to see positivity. And that's how social media influences people. But these influencers came around and they found that going to the extremes emotionally was what got them the most connection to their audience. It's what made people watch. Nobody wants to watch a normal day in my life. They want to watch me go crash my Ferrari, get into a fight with Casey Neistat, and then get arrested because that's a fucking insane video. You know, and nobody wants to watch just a normal good day where I go to work and maybe they have free pizza. They want to watch a video where I fly all the way to Dubai, I get some pizza, throw it off the tallest building in the world, and then jump off of it on a bungee cord that breaks. And then I've got this is an insane video. Like maybe I've got a parachute that I pull and now I'm, I get down to the bottom and drink a beer or whatever. I don't know. Catch the pizza mid-fall, eat it, and then drink a beer. That would be a crazy video. I don't even know if that's physically... I don't think that's possible because of the laws of physics, but that would be a crazy video, and that's what everybody wants to see, and that's the way things went, right? At first, it was just these Facebook groups, right? And like, oh, you're a fan of Game of Thrones, so we'll show you Game of Thrones content every now and then. And then Facebook realized the more they throw groups in there, the easier it is to throw advertisements in there. Because at the same time, like if you're looking through Facebook and it's like, oh, there's David, there's Eric, there's Stacy, there's, I don't know, we're just coming up with generic American names now, but if you see all these names and then there's like an ad for Trojan condoms, you're like, whoa, what the fuck, Facebook? This isn't what you're all about. You're about showing me what my friends are up to, not trying to, I don't need these to masturbate. Anyways, but like that's not what Facebook's about. But then if they throw in these groups, right, now it's like, okay, there's Stacy, there's Eric, there's Game of Thrones advertising, their new Game of Thrones cookies. Oh, that's sort of cool. There's Greg, there's, I don't know, my favorite band. And then it's like, and here's an ad for Grey Goose vodka. And it's sort of like more natural because you're sort of watching brands already and they just threw one in there. More likely to click on the ad. So Facebook sort of went with it. And it's the same with all these different social media companies. They start pushing these things that are more advertiser friendly. In Facebook's case, I don't have any proof behind this, but I believe that's part of the reason why they put groups and things like that into the algorithm or into your feed. In the case of YouTube, I think that's why certain words are censored. They're not allowing you to say COVID because advertisers don't want to be near that. When I say COVID, like I did just now, this video is going to make less money. And because it makes less money, Facebook is less likely to promote it. Because if you didn't know, one of the things all companies want to do is make money. Back in the day with Facebook, MySpace, it was more of that like startup internet feel. And not startup feel I'm talking about. I'm talking about the beginning days of the internet when you couldn't go on here and find everything. It would be like I couldn't just go on the internet back in the 90s and find anything I wanted. I had to actually dig for it. Sometimes you'd have to actually go to a bookstore to figure out how to beat a level in a game. You couldn't just jump on YouTube and find it. And that's good and that's bad. In one sense, having all this information at our fingertips has allowed us to grow so much faster. Like the meta in games and all of that now is crazy compared to what it used to be. It used to be just you and the boys would get together, you'd LAN it up, or you'd be playing some video, some console games, everybody would have a controller, and the best guy was the guy who knew like one little trick, right? Like in Mario Kart, there were certain areas that you could like jump over things to just get the jump on someone, like jump over barriers and stuff like that. And that was like the big thing. Like someone knew how to do that, and you're like, holy shit, bro, you're insane. And now you can figure out how to do that in an hour on YouTube, and you'll probably know 10 other cheats and hacks and different things like that. And that is a crazy progression as far as human knowledge goes. It used to be that it would have to like progress from person to person to person to person to person until it gets to this one guy who could use it to like just dunk on someone. And I mean, everybody's using it, but it would just take so much longer for things to get in. There'd be all these rumors. It was like, hey, I heard like Greg's father, who knows like who knows his grandfather? No shit. Whose grandfather knows this person, and this person at Nintendo said there's going to be a 151st Pokemon. It's like, oh, holy shit. And now that just goes online instantly. It's like within an hour, the whole world knows. Great. But at the same time, it's interesting because that does allow society to be shaped more. And again, it's such a useful tool that it's made a lot of money. And because it's made a lot of money, they want to make more money because that's how the stock market works. If you made $1 billion this year, they expect you to make $2 billion next year. It's harder and harder for your money to grow like that, right? Like us normal folks, and I'm assuming Elon Musk and Bill Gates are too busy to listen to this bullshit, but like us normal folks, sorry if you're offended, we don't have enough money that we had those problems. We don't have enough money that it's like, hey, you need to make like double what you made last year. Can you do it? And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't even know if that's physically possible. It might be more money than this whole industry brings in. We don't have that problem. I've never been like, oh, can I double my money? Like I could go to Vegas, put it all on black, and I have a 50-50 shot at doing it. Like they'll allow that. They won't allow Elon Musk, Bill Gates, or Microsoft Corporation to do that because it's just too much money. So these companies have more and more hard times making money, so they've got to advance their algorithm to be more and more advertiser friendly, so advertisers are willing to pay them money. And what advertisers don't like, and this is why you don't see it on TV, they don't like swear words, they don't like negative opinions, they don't like you to have these conversations because a lot of these conversations do leave people with negative feelings. If you have one conversation, right, like, again, let's take the Twitch thing, right? Twitch, fairly progressive people that watch the platform. It's a lot of younger people. They have more progressive ideas because they're younger. The younger generation generally tends to be more progressive, and they tend to be better than the older generation. And that's a good thing. That's how it should be. But because of that, having the Destiny thing, the conversation where he talks about transsexuals and says that they shouldn't be in sporting events, that's something that most of the Twitch audience doesn't really vibe with. I get it. Because they don't vibe with it, Twitch doesn't want to show it, so they banned Destiny off the platform, and now everything's good. The advertisers are more likely to pay because they don't have to be in front of something that people don't vibe with or behind it or whatever. They can be right in between the conversation where you reinforce someone's beliefs and then you reinforce someone's beliefs. And doing that will cause them to have a stronger connection to the product that's advertised in between that. Unfortunately, that isn't necessarily good for society because I don't think that allows us to have these conversations, right? Like if you want to talk about something that's like way out there and then you put an ad there, it could give viewers a negative impression about that advertisement. And that's one of the problems that we have right now. Everybody's going into their own little circles because of this sort of effect, right? The right is getting more and more right, and the advertisers there are just going deeper and deeper because they're, if you're advertising to people who are more right-leaning, then you're fine advertising on more right-leaning topics. And it's the same with the left. But what we don't have is we don't have that middle ground anymore because the middle ground tends to leave more people with a sort of negative and more neutral emotion, and that is bad for advertisers. So that's why a lot of this stuff I think is banned. And I think a lot of social media companies are going more liberal. I think a lot of companies in general are going more liberal. Part of that's because of tech. Tech is in general more liberal. It tends to be, coastal cities tend to be more liberal, and traditionally that's because coastal cities tend to get a lot more of these ideas in, right? Like if you go back to the early days, like early days of society in general, coastal cities, that's where there'd be more intermingling of cultures because everybody was traveling everywhere by ship. So you'd be in a port city, they'd be a little bit more cool with new ideas because it's a port city, and that's generally what happens, right? Like maybe you're in Europe and someone comes in from China and you've never seen anyone Asian before. Now you've seen them and most of your country hasn't. And then they introduce you to this concept of, I don't know, zodiac symbols or something like that. And that's something that most of society at the time doesn't have. You got this new concept, you combine it with yours, you sort of merge the two together, and now you've got some sort of weird zodiac like ideology that you can slowly spread to the inner coasts. And, there's more ideas there because there's more people, and those people all have differing viewpoints, and they get to have these discussions and sort of work those viewpoints out, figure out what they think is real, what they think isn't real, what they like, what they don't like. It's the same as like if you give a kid hamburgers every day, they might hate hamburgers, but they won't know it because that's all they've ever had. Maybe they really love sushi. Maybe that would be their favorite food in the world. But if you never give someone sushi, they never know that. But at the same time, if you never give someone sushi and it's the food that they hate the most in the world, they never know that either. And a lot of people, I think a lot of companies and people and just things in general don't want to show people things that they hate. So they just keep showing people things that they're more and more likely to just love. And I don't know exactly where I'm going with this. I'm rambling a bit, but I think that's a bad thing. I think it's causing a lot of really good conversations to be lost because people aren't having them anymore. And I think it used to be that way. Like even if we go back to like 2018, 2017, people were getting canceled for having bad ideas. And I get it. Canceling for the right reason, you should be canceled, right? Like Hitler should be canceled. He shouldn't be allowed to have a YouTube channel. Maybe let him create the YouTube channel, but everyone should just hate on it, right? And then the problem is, what happens if it starts getting popular? Do you ban this dude, or do you let him keep going? And this is the problem that YouTube and all these companies are faced with, right? And again, love him or hate him, I think Trump is one of the people that sort of really represents that. He's very good at taking advantage of social media, and he's very good at making these statements that people either love or hate. And those are two very strong emotions. And because of that, he tends to get more airtime than someone who's in the middle. And it's really like one of the ways that influencers take advantage of social media too. You know, like a lot of things that people believe about real life, or people believe about real life because of these social media connections, just isn't real, right? Like a lot of these people you see on Instagram who are driving exotic cars, they're driving cars that you can just rent. I've rented a Ferrari in Vegas. It's not that it's expensive, but it's not that expensive. If you got like a couple $100, you can do it. It's a cool experience. I liked it. And if I wanted to, I could have probably pretended that Ferrari was mine. I took a million pictures with it. I could post them all over and be like, hey, look at this. I just got it. And if those posts do good, then I can rent that Ferrari again in a couple weeks and take it again. I do the same thing with my videos. Sometimes I make a lot of videos at once. I don't even have to be filming this on Saturday for it to be Shit Talk Saturday, because all I've got to do is post it on Saturday. And that's how a lot of this stuff works, right? And people just don't realize that. They do, but they don't. You know, it's the same with like private jets. You can take a picture in a private jet. It doesn't necessarily mean you flew in a private jet. You know, and there's all these deals you can get with private jets too. Like I know people who take them every now and then, and sometimes you can get these deals between cities. Like if a jet has to fly from New York to Boston, maybe they'll give you a discount flying from Boston to New York because they've got to do it anyways. And if you're willing to work on their time schedule, they'll do it at half price. And now if you've got a bunch of friends that want to do it, maybe it is cheaper than taking tickets, or even cheaper than taking the train. I don't think it would ever be cheaper than the train, but like, you see where I'm going with this. There's these things like that, and people can pretend that this isn't like this extreme thing that they're doing. It's just normal life for them. And it's not. They're taking a picture of a really good moment in their life, and then they try and project it as normal. And the hope is if people see it as normal, they'll follow them because they see they're successful, they see they're doing all these cool things, and then because of that, they can do more and more cool things. As much as I hate to admit it, it's sort of the same with this YouTube channel. For instance, like when I started the channel, I wouldn't just buy a new game because it's popular. Now I do. One of the reasons I can do this is because generally just making guides on these videos, I'm going to make my money back on the game. So when I buy Elden Rings, when I buy Dying Light 2, I don't have to think like, is this a game I really want to spend my money on? All I've got to think is there a chance that I can make a couple videos that do good and make me my money back? Dying Light 2, I didn't really make my money back on. Elden Rings, I made it back many times over. I have a video with like 200,000 views, another with 40, another with 30. Doesn't make me a ton of money because I keep those videos short, but it still makes me enough that it covers the game. And that is something that I can do. And a lot of people, they think, oh man, that's awesome. He can just blow his money on whatever game he wants. And that is awesome, but that's not the reality that you should be looking at, right? Because I'm doing it from a business perspective. I'm going to make my money back on this. Why wouldn't I do it? You're doing it from a perspective of, is this something that's going to entertain you? Maybe you spend a little bit of time, you realize that, hey, I'd like Elden Rings. It's a really good game. I like difficulty. I'm not that drawn into the story because personally, I don't think the story is that great with it. But like the story's good, but the environment's very good, but it doesn't feel like there's any sort of story being told. The story you're weaving is more in your own head, which is interesting. But for some people, that's not a thing that they like. But right, like people just like the gameplay. They don't care if the story's done in that way, and they really do like the difficulty and the way things don't scale and the way that some areas are harder than others. And the game design in general is just phenomenal for that game, right? But like, maybe that's the game that would really vibe with you, but you buy both games because I buy both games. And you're like, hey, Serial Overdrive can do it. Why can't I? And it's like, well, I'm doing it because I'm going to make my money back. You're doing it because you want something that you enjoy. Those are two very different things in reality. I'm doing it too to see because I enjoy it. I enjoy making videos. I enjoy playing these games. But if I play Dying Light for a couple hours, I make one video and I'm like, I got halfway through the game and sort of stopped. It doesn't matter that much to me. Like I didn't spend that much time on it, but whatever. I tried it. It wasn't my thing. I can talk about it. It makes money back in a way for me. For you, it doesn't. You just wasted your money and you had a 1 hour experience that you didn't really like and you feel like you got a little ripped off. But that's the problem. It's the same with like these cars, right? These influencers, they have a car. They have a nice car. They post all these pictures with it. And you're like, man, this dude has a Lamborghini and he seems to be loving life. Maybe I should get a Lamborghini too. We're sort of like equals. A lot of the time people think that they're equals with the people they're listening to. And a lot of the time they aren't. Like people watch XQC and they think like, oh yeah, he's just like me. No, the dude's probably worth he's probably worth 8 figures, right? Like he probably has 2 commas. Yeah, 33 would be insane. He probably has like 2 commas in his net worth, right? And 8 figures. he makes a lot, and good for him. Like, there's nothing, I don't hate on him for that. Like, good for him. That's not a negative thing that I'm saying. It's just a fact. But then people think like, hey, we're on the same level. If he's buying all these games, why can't I buy all these games? And the fact of the matter is, he's buying those games as a business expense, and as an expense that's 0.000 whatever 1% of his net worth. And you're buying those games just to have fun and as a higher percent of your net worth. And I think that's one of the problems with social media. Everybody wants everything to be exactly what they see on social media, and they don't realize that sometimes the best things in life, they're not necessarily free, but they're not as expensive as you think. For instance, take myself. I've made a good deal of money, decent amount of money. Like, I could, if I wanted to, and I set myself up correctly, I could just retire right now. That's not what I'm looking to do, but I could do it. I have enough money that a lot of people, if they got my bank account, they'd consider themselves very lucky. And I am very lucky. But a lot of my favorite memories aren't necessarily things that are expensive, right? Like, just hanging out in shitty apartments with good friends and drinking beers. Like, those are some of my fondest memories. And those are memories that I think all of us have. And all of us could have. So necessarily, like, I've driven some very nice cars. I've got a very nice car, in my opinion. It's very nice. In some people's opinion, it would probably be shit, but it's a very nice car. But one of my prized cars, well, now I sound like, no. One of my favorite cars is worth $2,000, and it's just because it's the car my parents gave to me, and I really like driving it. It feels like a really cool car, and it's not that expensive. It's a $2,000 car, right? Like, that's something that's fairly achievable, but then at the same time, like, you'd ask me, like, if you ask me what my most expensive car is, it definitely isn't it. I'm not going to, this isn't brag. It is and it isn't. I hate doing this, but, like, my point is, sometimes your most prized possessions aren't your most valuable possessions, and sometimes what we see on social media is what's promoted to us because that's what would be cool to everybody. If I post a Lamborghini as my car, everybody's going to think that's so cool. If I post an actual picture of my car, which I'm not going to even go into the brand or anything like that, the $2,000 car that I really like, nobody would think that's cool. It's cool to me, but it's not cool to you. And that's not what sells things. That's not what gets people followers. And that's not what they're posting. And I think sometimes as viewers, as people who are consuming this content, we forget that fact. And we think that we should be chasing those same things that everybody loves because everybody knows they're cool. Everybody knows that they appeal to them. Like, if I post a picture of me and my friends hanging out, like, it's going to look pretty lame. But if I post a picture of us, me and a bunch of paid actors in Dubai, it's going to look awesome. Better experience is going to be just me and my friends hanging out for me personally. But for the group, for the mass consumer, it's going to be that picture of us doing something crazy in Dubai. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's these stories that we weave in our head about these products that are going to give us these experiences that we really love, and they won't. Anyways, I think everybody gets what I'm saying, and I've gone off the point now, but I don't know. Hopefully this is a conversation that gets some meaning from some people. And again, I'm just talking to my computer screen here. There's a lot of things that I'm wrong about, and some of this stuff might be that, but, like, I don't know. I think it's an important conversation to have, and as someone who has a bit of social influence and a decent amount of money, not from social media or anything like that, but I've tried some of these nicer things in life. Like, I've had Wagyu beef and all that, and my fondest memory isn't of eating a nice steak that cost me $200. It's hanging out with friends and eating McDonald's and just shooting shit. And that's the reality of it. And I think that's the reality that a lot of people are missing right now. They're so busy chasing these crazy experiences and these valuable things that they don't realize some of the most valuable things you get are the memories, and memories with people and experiences that to other people might not be valuable at all, but to you, they're priceless. Like, anyone can have a kid. Anyone can have a kid, right? Like, not all of us have kids, but all of us could have kids. Those memories that you get from those kids, though, are going to be extremely special. But if you take that, it's basically the whole thing of, like, oh, he's showing me pictures of his kids again. One of the reasons someone shows pictures of their kids is because they treasure them so much. And one of the reasons that people don't see those pictures as valuable is because they don't treasure those kids the same amount. And you shouldn't treasure random kids, by the way. That's very pedo. But you get what I'm saying. Like, your kids are extremely valuable to you, but they're not as valuable to someone else. And hopefully they're not valuable at all, because that's just like that's child labor. Let's not do that. But you get what I'm saying here. And yeah, I don't know. It's a very, hopefully this point's thought out. I don't know. I don't even know if this is a good conversation to have. I talk about gaming most of the time. What am I doing? But But hopefully there's some nuggets of truth in there, and hopefully someone walks away with a little bit of extra knowledge and they feel a little bit better about themselves. They realize why there's certain reasons that we should have some discourse on social media and why you shouldn't be chasing the same thing as all these influencers. Because even if it's not sponsored, sometimes what these influencers are promoting is just things that are going to get mass attention and not things that are truly special to them or would be truly special to you. If you've got a story behind something that you obtain, that's generally more valuable than just having something extremely valuable. I mean, hey, if you're looking for an investment, don't invest it in sentimental items. Don't expect the items that you invest in to be extremely sentimental to you. Sometimes they can be, but generally they aren't. Good investments aren't sentimental, they're based on numbers. And a lot of sentimental items aren't based on numbers, they're based on experiences and your connection to those items. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if people got anything from this. If you like this sort of conversation, let me know. If you don't, like, we can go back to talking about games or anything like that. I've got a ton of stuff I could talk about for Rust. I've got a ton of stuff for Elden Rings. But yeah, this is just like the old school video style that I used to do. There's no cuts or anything like that. This isn't something that's going to get me sponsors or get me views or get me money. The last video I made literally made less than $1, I think. I think it made like 69 cents. Not really. That's a bit of a meme. But it didn't make much. And I'm fine with that because I think this is a cool conversation to have, and it's cool that people are just willing to sit through and listen to this and actually put in time to hearing me probably talk in the background about something that they don't even care about. But maybe you learned something. I mean, I like listening to podcasts in the background. Hopefully someone else gets something like that from this. But yeah, I'm sort of out of topics here. And it's like I could jump to like Elden Rings is awesome. Like I think the Rust fishing changes aren't that bad. And I'm not actually paid by D11 to give negative or positive news. I don't know why people think I'm paid by D11. Sometimes I like the stuff they do, sometimes I don't. I think the bread skins are utterly ridiculous, and I think fishing is sort of cool to add to the game. But for some reason, like one of those opinions people think I'm paid for, and one of those opinions people think I'm trying to destroy the game. D11 definitely isn't paying me for the positive and the negative. And they're not paying me. But like, how ridiculous would it be for them to pay me to be like, Serial, talk about Rust and only in a good way. And then like, we're not even gonna get into that. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna end it here. Until next time, peace.